How did Avraham find God? Avraham is considered the father of the three great monotheistic religions. He's the first person to discover the truth of God, that there was only one God. But how did he come to believe this? And the truth is, we have no idea. Our parasha this week, Lech Lecha, Go Forward, begins with Hashem giving Avram, his name was Avram before it became Avraham, giving him a command to leave his family, everything he knew, to start a new monotheistic religion, a new faith, sharing God's oneness and reality with the world. But we don't know anything before that other than the fact that he was born, and we know the name of his father and his brother, and then everything going forward we learn about him. But how he came to be this faithful man, we don't know. We have many beautiful rabbinic midrashim, the stories, the most famous one about Avraham smashing the idols in his father's shop, proving that they're just a bunch of worthless, lifeless pieces of rock that have no power whatsoever. But it didn't happen, even though it teaches beautiful lesson. There's another midrash about Avram going up in a theological, philosophical battle with Nimrod and proving himself and his faith in God. But again, it's just a midrash. Truth is, we don't know how Avraham became Avraham. And the question I want to explore now is, should we? Are we supposed to know? So I want to look at the answers of three different rabbis about why they believe we don't know, and perhaps we shouldn't know. So we'll start with the oldest opinion, which is from Ramban Nachmanides in the 13th century. And this answer doesn't really have anything to do with us and the way that we approach faith. It has to do with Avraham and the figure that he needs to be. If we are basing our entire history as a people and our faith on one man's belief in God, we cannot know about his struggles. We don't want to know about all the questions, the other gods he explored, because it might undermine the perfect faith he had. And by the way, there are moments in this week's parasha where even Avraham himself seems to imply that he needs proof from God that something will happen, but that doesn't mean he doesn't believe in God. That means he's questioning what God may or may not be able to do. And even then the rabbis argue, no, he's not really questioning God. He's questioning himself, and does he deserve God's goodness? But regardless, Ramban argues that Abraham's faith needs to be perfect for him to be a figure that we can base our religions off of. Not a God, but and I don't want to say an idol for obvious reasons, but he's no longer a person that we can emulate. He's taken out of being a person that we can really learn anything from. And in fact, in the beginning of his journey, when God says, go to the land that I will show you, he doesn't go right to the land of Israel. He kind of wanders around building up his family. And it's been suggested that perhaps one of the reasons he's doing this, I believe Rabbi Tzvi Grummet suggests this in his book, is because his focus is on his family. He's not ready to devote himself completely to God. Not until he's willing to sacrifice his son. Even though he doesn't kill his son, he cuts all ties with the world as we know it, and he becomes no longer a father, because his kids never talk to him again. He becomes a figure, a symbol. So he can't be that if he has a backstory like Moshe or Yosef. The second opinion is from the 19th century by a rabbi who's called the Sfat Emet, the lips of truth, after his great work. And what he suggests is that there was nothing necessarily special about Avram himself or about his revelation. He was an incredible person, but everyone knew about the idea of there being one God. It was easy to find God if you were looking for God. Avram just happened to be the first person to respond. So we don't need to know. There's no complex backstory to it. Avram just decided to respond to the call to this one God, the God that would become the God of the Hebrews. And what's beautiful about that is already it's becoming something that we can respond to ourselves. Faith is out there. God is out there. All you need to do is grab it. And it doesn't matter who you were before. It doesn't matter your upbringing. As long as you respond and connect to God, God is there for you. And then the third answer, which is also quite beautiful, is from a contemporary rabbi, Rabbi Yoel Ben Nun. And what he suggests is that if there was some foundational event, like he had been saved in a basket, and he had been, a prince in the house of Pharaoh, and been talked to at a bush, all of these moments, and I'm speaking, of course, about Moshe, about Moses, if there had been moments like that for Avraham that helped him discover his faith, then if we can't emulate those moments, if we can't recreate them, then we can never have faith like him. I'm never going to talk to a burning bush, but I might be able to wake up one day and decide that I want to believe in God. So the only way, so none of us can be a Moshe. And that's the rabbis say that. There's never going to be another Moshe. There will never be a prophet like him in Israel. That's the end of the Torah. And that's true, and that's fine. We don't need to be a Moshe. But we could be an Avraham. We could find faith wherever we look for it. And that's beautiful, and that allows us to connect with the character, the figure of Avraham and his faith in our own lives at any point, regardless of what our background is. But I want to end with this one other thought, is we know nothing about Avraham before Hashem chose him, but once Hashem chooses him, God does say a lot about the character and the person that Avraham is. And in some ways, that does tell us about why God chose him. It doesn't tell us why Avraham chose God, but it does tell us a little bit about how we can live our lives. And this is, again, from the Parsha, from Bereshit. And it says in the Hebrew, chapter 18, 19, I believe. I could look it up. Yeah, 18, 19, yes. And it says, Ki yadati, this is Hashem speaking. Ki yadati leman asher yetzaveh et banav, et beto acharav, v'shamru derech Hashem la'asot tzedakah u'mishbat, leman havi Hashem al Avraham et asher diber alav. Because I, Hashem, I, God, have known, loved, and chosen Avraham because he commands his children and his household after him to observe the way of the Lord, to do compassionate righteousness and moral justice. So the focus here is not about how Avraham discovered his faith in Hashem, it's how he lives his life and what he does now with this relationship with Hashem. And he uses it to inspire a life of righteousness, a life of compassion, and he teaches it to his children. So whether or not you're lucky enough to have that moment that anyone can have where you wake up and you wake up with pure, full emunah, that's actually not the most important thing. The most important thing is how that emunah inspires your life. So whether or not you have it, you can choose to do compassion and righteousness, and perhaps if you start living that kind of life, reaching out and helping people, then maybe in those moments you might discover God. And maybe that's where Avraham found Hashem, is in his moments of kindness, doing a kind act, and he just looked up and said, I know God is here in this moment. And that's how his journey began. How will yours? Shabbat Shalom.